Welcome to Sabbath Collective. We're a community of people interested in celebrating the Sabbath and pursuing God and our times through an ancient Hebraic worldview of Scripture. So tonight, hey Beth, great to see you, honey. Tonight, we'll be looking at the unpredictable present. The unpredictable present. The always brilliant Rabbi Abraham Heschel spoke about it this way. The course of life is unpredictable. No one can write his autobiography in advance. And so I think we pretty much all know that from experience. Hey, hey Beth. So God walks into the tent of a 99-year-old Abraham. Okay, here's the scene. And says, I am El Shaddai. A year from now, your 90-year-old wife will give birth to a child. And then in Genesis 17:2, he continues and says, I will increase your numbers greatly. You will be the father of many nations. And then in 16 and 17, he continues, I will bless her. Moreover, I will give you a son by her. She will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. And now we see what happened. The text says, at this, Abraham fell on his face and laughed. He thought to himself, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah give birth at 90? Hey, that's like pretty much a legitimate question, right? Genesis 18:10 and 15, it continues. God said, I will certainly return to you around this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. And now Sarah is sort of eavesdropping by the tent. And the text says Sarah heard him from the entrance of the tent. So Sarah laughed to herself. And the text says, Adonai said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and ask, am I really going to bear a child when I am so old? And then God asks, is anything too hard for Adonai? So God asks two questions here. And then it goes on, at this season next year, I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah, when God said this, denied it, saying, I didn't laugh because she was afraid. And God said, not so, you laughed. First of all, I think this little part is pretty darn hysterical. Like God saying you laughed and Sarah said, nah, it wasn't me. Like that's kind of comedic there. But in any event, he asked two questions. Why did you laugh? And is anything too hard for me? Abraham was 75 when God told him to leave his homeland and promised him that he would make him a great nation. And Genesis 12 says when they got to Canaan, it says again, to your offspring, I will give this land. And there was continued talk of offspring from God. Then when Abraham was 86, him and Sarah decide to kind of manipulate the fulfillment of this. And Abraham has a child with, had Ishmael by Hagar, her handmaid. 24 years later, God comes and says this again, and they both laugh. Now, here's a kind of another funny part about this. How many sermons, if you sort of grew up in the Western church, have you heard from pastors? I'm not saying they're all men that preach this, but the majority of the ones I've heard have been from men that only preach a sermon about Sarah's laughter and never mention Abraham laughed too. They both laughed. Who does that remind you of? Kind of like Adam and Eve, right? Or the woman and the guy caught in adultery and they only wanted to kill the woman, right? But here's the point of this story. It's not about the laughing. The point is about the questions God asks. Why are you laughing? And is anything too hard for me? So don't miss this, okay? Because it's big. Both Abraham and Sarah wanted a child. And God said it would happen, and they wanted to believe it would happen. But it did not happen in the past up until this point, and she was not with child in this unpredictable present that they were in. So, keep tracking this. Sarah had a disappointment connected to the past because she didn't have a child that she imposed onto her unseen future. And Abraham did the same because it hasn't happened at the present moment. In other words, she wasn't with child when God kept saying that. But the present moment, here's the crazy thing about the present moment, right? The present moment is now. And the present moment is now. And the present moment is now. Okay? It keeps changing. The present moment lasts a moment, and then it's the past. The present moment is not static. So basically, she and he are either living in the past or living in the future with this kind of thinking. We humans really like to think we can time travel, trying to live in the past and the future, bouncing back and forth between the two, but not spending much time in the unpredictable present moment. So when Abraham and Sarah go back to the promise, which they think of as unfulfilled because she wasn't pregnant at that moment in time, and they remember the mistakes that they made with Hagar and Ishmael, which they cannot change, and they also look to the future based on the past and project no children onto the future, they miss living in the unpredictable present. They miss that. So when God comes to them and speaks that in the present moment, they're only in the past and in the future. They're not in that unpredictable moment of the present. That's why they think it's funny. That's why they laugh. And the questions God asks is, what's so funny if I'm saying it right now? Is something too hard for me to do? And Abraham and Eve are, but. And it's about right in the unpredictable moment. We cannot time travel. We can only be in the now. And what that means is that we need to let go of our obsession with control. They laugh because their past and their future were connected in a way that made them disconnect with the present. But here's the thing, control is an illusion. Give me a thumbs up if you kind of figured that out. Control is an illusion, okay? There's really no such thing. We have a holiday coming up this month called Sukkot, and it's a Hebrew biblical holiday, and it's a celebration of God's provision during the time when the Jewish people wandered in the desert. And it's celebrated and remembered by spending time living, or at least eating, in a tent, an open tent outdoors. And it's called Ziman Simchatenu, the festival of our joy. That's what Jewish people call this festival. In Judaism, they call this festival of the unpredictable present our joy. What could be joyful about, as Rabbi Jonathan Sachs referenced this, which is a really good way to look at it, what could be joyful about radical uncertainty? Because that's really what it is, right? It's complete radical uncertainty. What could be joyful in that? Even the modern celebration that they have with the tents, the sukkah, connects to the unpredictable present in the holiday. Because even now when they celebrate the fact that they wandered the desert and the only reason why they survived is that God gave them their needs, met their needs, even today, they're hanging out in the tent it's a storm outside right now. That could happen while you're living in a tent with openings all around it. So it really kind of symbolizes this fact that you're living in this sort of unpredictable present. And then I built this tent and made preparations for nothing. It was wasted, right? Because it was a storm. It was wasted time in the preparation. And by the way, wasted time in the preparation seems to be a big thing in our uncertainty about the unpredictable life. So it could look like this. You're going to take a trip. Hey, Mike, good to see you. You're going to take a trip and you plan and you plan and you put all this energy into planning, and then the trip falls apart. And so you look at it like, I wasted all that time. You date someone. You have affection for them, feelings for them. You get to know them, and maybe you realize this isn't going to work out. This is not a good fit for us. And then what's the first thing you say? I wasted that time. You get a job, and you think it's a good job, and you do okay, but then after a while, it really just, you are not living out of your true core values, so it's not a good fit. And what's the first thing you say about that season that you worked in that job? It's a waste of time, right? So we often talk about this, the uncertainty of the unpredictability of life. When we make our plans, we waste our time and we don't see it happen. So many of my plans have changed due to extenuating circumstances. Among, like, hey, a worldwide pandemic, right? And usually, because I'm a preparer, right? Those of you who know me, you know I'm a researcher, I'm a preparer. I do a lot of preparation for something that maybe never happens. And that can kind of feel discouraging, like a waste sometimes. But there's a thing to understand here in this that's very important about this unpredictable present time, and the time that you spend trying to plan for something that may not happen the way you thought it was going to happen. It's very good to understand that with this time investment, what we call the inefficiency of preparation, you can actually look at it from a different perspective. So let me give you an example. I was reading recently from a business sociologist, and he was talking about all the changes that business cultures did pre, mid, and post. We're not post yet, but COVID. And he talked about the leadership team of a U.S. grocery chain, a major U.S. grocery chain, that wanted to sort of streamline the time that their employees spent on responsibilities. They wanted to eliminate all the wasted efforts. So they incorporated something called an allocation algorithm computer system. And what this computer system did was that the employees came in and they were told exactly what to do by the computer program. So it had this expertise in forecasting the future. But it didn't work. It didn't work because of the unpredictable present. A jar of pickles could be dropped in the aisle, spilling all over the floor, smelly pickle juice. And an employee would have to stop and hear, Irv, clean up on aisle 7. I wasn't even in aisle 7, Irv. For all of you who remember Mr. Mom, that was a flashback, an homage to Mr. Mom. But again, they couldn't plan for that, right? They didn't know someone was going to drop pickle juice, a jar of pickles on the floor. That was not predictable. So the algorithm could not predict for those things and assign people to those things. It could predict maybe there would be things that would happen, but not when they were going to happen, not how they were going to happen, and not what was going to happen. Sometimes the time we put into things can be a part of preparedness. Hear me say that. Sometimes the time we put into things can be a part of a preparedness. So how many people have, give me a thumbs up if you felt that that was one of the things that you always say, I wasted time, I wasted time, I wasted time. When in living in the unpredictable present moment, you realize what you thought was going to happen is not going to happen. How many people just felt, oh man, what a waste of time? Let me look at this from another perspective with you. For instance, the businesses who made alliances with many other industries, this was also one of the things I was reading about, because they couldn't predict what would happen on the global stage of their particular lane of business, they may have been viewed as inefficient because they were making partnerships or relationships with other businesses that may or may not have any kind of partnership with them in the future. But their model was like, let's just really make a lot of relationships because we don't know what our future will look like. So that's the way they did their business. But this wasn't efficient. It was preparedness. Because what happened with these kinds of businesses that had already invested in relationships is when the pandemic happened, they may not have needed all those relationships that they made, but they were able to tap in to ones already built and pivot and survive. My life isn't built by my control. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. Okay, say that with me. My life isn't built by my control. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. And accepting and even embracing the unpredictability allows for our peace when the unpredictable present moment gives us an unplanned situation that requires us to pivot. Now, how many people, right when I'm saying that, those words, unpredictable, unplanned, pivot, you just feel like, oh, I hate those words. This is how we're conditioned. But to live in this flow of acceptance, not only of awareness, but acceptance, helps us to pivot easier. So let's look at another truth here. Yet another thing I observed under the sun, and again, this is in the book of Ecclesiastes, this is Solomon. Yet another thing I observed under the sun is that races aren't won by the swift or battles by the strong. By the way, this is what Western culture tells us, right? Races are won by the fastest and battles are won by the strong, right? And Solomon is saying, well, this one thing I have observed. It's not true. It can be true, but it's not always true. And that food doesn't go to the wise or wealth to the intelligent. Have you known really stupid people to be rich? I have. Have you known really smart people to be poor? I have too. Wealth doesn't go to the intelligent or favor to the experts. And again, what he's doing is challenging this sort of normal cultural perspective. We see these examples of what he just named all throughout the Bible, right? Whether it's David and Goliath or whoever it is. We always see these kinds of things in Scripture. It's very counter to our Western culture. Solomon is saying what we think should happen doesn't. Okay? This is what he's saying. What I've learned in my life is what we think should happen oftentimes doesn't. And then he goes on and says, rather, time and chance rule them all. So Solomon is saying it's time and it's chance. So what is time and chance? It's two Hebrew words here. Time is eighth, and it means an event, a time of experience. So This is not an abstract concept here, okay, like how we look at time. It is a thing that happens. It's in this particular Hebrew word. There's a few Hebrew words for time. This particular Hebrew word is not abstract. It's an event or it's an experience, right? Something that happens. And chance doesn't mean like flip a coin how we mean it. It's pega, and it means an occurrence or just a happening in life. It's not necessarily planned for. It's not necessarily predictable. It just happens. It's an event, an experience, an occurrence, a happening, can present itself at any moment and alter the best laid plans, right? Expect the unexpected is the best world view. Expect the unexpected is the best world view. Now, that doesn't mean you don't plan. It doesn't mean you don't hope. It certainly, you don't intentionally waste your time. None of those things. Of course, there's common sense with all this. It simply means don't be surprised when things change. Be ready to pivot. Now, let me give you an example of this that I just saw. I was watching with my son Matthew a special on Billie Eilish. I really love her music, Billie Eilish. For those of you who don't know who she is, she's an extremely talented young woman, songwriter and singer. And they did like a documentary about her. And she was about, and it was showing family life in the process and her kind of trying to get used to being on the road. But one thing you know about her for sure, she seems to truly care about her fans. Like, it seems like it. She truly cares about her fans. And so she's like 17 or 18 at this point in the documentary. And she goes on stage and she just gives this jump and she rolls her ankle. And it's really, really bad. And if you've ever done that, you know what it feels like, right? I have. It really hurts. And she just rolled it completely over, and it was almost like a snap. And she actually she thought she broke her ankle. And right when it happened, she knew she wouldn't be able to perform. Right, you know? And so she just is like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I wanted to give you guys a good show, and I hurt myself. And she starts kind of losing it a little bit because she doesn't know how to reconcile the fact that there's these thousands of people. I think it was a New York concert, if I remember right. Thousands of people that are wanting to see her, that paid money, that love her, that know every word to the song. And she gives them everything she has. And she couldn't do it because she got hurt on the first note of the first song. So she goes off stage. They put a like little air cast on her. She tries it. She's still hurt. She's in tears. She's like, I can't. And somehow she summons up the strength to go out on the stage, and she does a concert for the people. And she starts out with a slow song where she's sitting on a stool. Here's the point. I loved how you saw all that angst of the process of pivoting. This is real humanity, okay? She had a goal, a vision, a passion to give her audience the best show she could. And she knew she couldn't. She couldn't even move on her one foot, right? So she knew she couldn't give them what she wanted to give them. And so she had to pivot. It was the unpredictable present moment. And how we deal with that is a process, right? And we could see it lived out with her. But this is what we feel, what we experience it like. It's not easy, is it? And when something happens and it's unpredictable, and all of a sudden we realize, oh my gosh, I have to change, and I have to change right now in this unpredictable moment. We must learn to lean into the unpredictability. So let's look at how Paul frames this mindset. He says, he's talking about sufferings, right? And by the way, not everything unpredictable is about suffering. It could just be change of plan, right? But he's talking about sufferings. I don't think the sufferings we are going through now are even worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed to us in the future. And that's the book of Romans, chapter 8 and verse 18. So what is Paul doing here? Okay, Paul has a plan. He wants to share the good news. He wants people to feel accepted. He has a plan, right? He's going to travel. He's going to teach. He's going to raise up leaders. He's going to do all that. He has a plan. But his plans keep getting jacked up because people don't like what he's doing. So they get beat. They get imprisoned. They get all kinds of stuff. And so Paul finds a way to look at it. He says, I can't plan or change the situation. So no matter how much time he invested on figuring out what's the best way into a city or how to avoid being caught or whatever it is, no matter how he plans, he can't change the situation. It's the unpredictable present moment. So he said, well, I can't change it, but I'm going to change the way I relate to the situation. I'm going to change the way I look at the situation. I can't change the inconvenience. I can't change the costs. I can't change the uncertainty. I can't change the pain, but I can change the way I think about it. So, this is for us. We can't change anything. We can't control, but we can certainly change the way we relate to it when it happens. Notice I didn't even say if, because again, it's embracing that things will change. It's the unpredictable present moment. So what skills do we need to live in this unpredictable present moment to have preparedness for the unpredictable? What do you think is required? What do you think would be helpful for you to have to be able to deal with, accept the unpredictability in the present moment? Let me see some of your comments here. Hey, Evelyn, good to see you, honey. Maybe curiosity, right? Like how God was with Abraham and Sarah when he said, what's so funny about that? And he really asked that question. Why did you laugh? Is anything too hard for me? So he got right to the core of what was happening there. So maybe curiosity, right? We could ask questions. What am I feeling about this? What is this loss of control really making me connect to? What are my disappointments allowing me to feel fear about? Curiosity may be a good one, right? Let me see some other personality or traits or skills that you feel like would be helpful to be able to pivot in the unpredictable moments. So while you're writing them, let's reframe the questions that we often ask when the unpredictable happens, okay? Rather than ask, why me, which we tend to do that as humans, right? So when the unpredictable present moment happens and plans kind of go, we always say, why does this happen to me? Rather than why me, maybe we could ask, okay, what now? The what now is this kind of seed of hope planted in the unpredictable present, right? What now would be a good question. Let me see what you wrote. Beth said, self-worth, confidence, grounded in something other than jobs and money. Really great point, Beth, because, right, if our identity or our confidence is grounded in what our expectations were, that's going to be problematic, because then it's not just something that we do, it's something that we are. And then the fear of loss can be devastating. So that's a really great point, Beth. We can't have our identity connected in things like jobs or money in that way. Mike saying reframing questions, right? Isn't that cool? And God is so about that. Karen saying flexible. Yeah, definitely to be flexible. I really like curiosity, to ask questions of what we're experiencing, to ask questions of it, and that kind of gets to the core. Imagination is one as well, to be able to look at this with imagination. Courage maybe would be one as well. Hope is definitely born of imagination. Expect the unexpected. Absolutely, Mary. If we, we say that, but we really don't like it. And to be honest with you, I don't think very many people actually do, right? And even when they think they do, it's more about risk management, which means they're trying to predict the unexpected, which is fine. If you do that for your job or your kids, if you're a mom or whatever, that's fine. But if you're predicting the unexpected, it's no longer the unexpected, is it? What we're talking about is the unpredictability of the present moment, is things that just happen, right? And it's like Mary says, expect the unexpected, meaning you couldn't even plan or predict for this because you just really had absolutely no idea it was going to happen. And it's the embracing of that. Rebecca Solnit writes in her book, Hope in the Dark, hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. I love that phrase she uses, the spaciousness of uncertainty, because we always think uncertainty feels like it's confining, right? Like we feel like maybe we can't breathe and we're getting trapped. But here, this is so beautiful. The spaciousness of uncertainty is room to act. Hope is the story of uncertainty, which is more demanding than despair. Absolutely. Hope is the story of uncertainty, which is more demanding than despair, more frightening, and immeasurably more rewarding. This is just so concise and so true. Uncertainty is more demanding than despair. So we can throw ourselves into despair and say, "Oh, woe is me! This always happens to me. Why does this happen to me?" We can roll around in the mud of despair, no problem. But to live in the presence of uncertainty is more demanding and more frightening. But it's also, as she says, immeasurably more rewarding. Mike saying you need a whole separate weekly live just called Reframing Your Questions. That would be a cool topic, right, Mike? Yeah, I agree. That's a really cool topic. You could definitely do a lot on that. So this is our reframing, our re-envisioning to be able to live in peace in the unpredictable present moment. So we're going to close this time together with the lighting of the Shavuos candles. And traditionally, the mother of the home lights the candles, which connects us to the Sabbath light of peace and joy and unity. And then she encircles the candles 3 times with her hands, which is a gesture that simply welcomes in the Sabbath. We are blessed to know, as Ephesians 4:1 describes him, we are blessed to know God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. Let me read that verse one more time. It's Ephesians 4:1. If we look at God in this way, we can really understand that he's in the past and he's in the future. By the way, he's the only one that can time travel, right? He's in the past, he's in the future, and he's in the present unpredictable moment. We know him, God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And that's where we get our peace in the unpredictable present moment. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. It's good to be back, and I love you all. See you next week.